We click the shutter many times without thinking. Do we do that to capture the happiness at that moment? Or to capture ourselves at that moment? Once upon an aeon, there was a girl slumbering in a block of 6 phased ice. It merely floated in space, unaware of any coincidences, accidents, or their inevitabilities. Soon she would wake up greeted by unfamiliar faces, the Astral Express Crew. Tick tock, Destiny's chronograph was wound once again, and that day would become her namesake, March 7th. But do you think she would hold that memory dear because she was happy to have been woken up, or perhaps because she merely exists in it? With a shudder of her iconic camera, March 7th enters her everyday routine in the Astral Express. A cheerful and energetic member of the Astral Express crew, she has no problems making friends despite having no recollection of who she once was, an amnesiac. In fact, she had prepared 67 versions of her backstory, perhaps in a wide gamble to correctly guess what she ended up being if she ever found out who she was. Look, March shows her emotions on her sleeve, and it's interactions with her in the Astral Express and in our missions every day that showcase that the most. Dan Hong says March is annoying, but in a way that's what makes her endearing. And March herself wants to be like Himiko. She describes the navigator of the Astral Express as sensible, reliable, and elegant. I find that a very ironic thing to say, because those are the 3 things that are definitely not what you would use to describe March 7th. But then she follows it up with this line.
When I'm grown up, I'm gonna be just like her. I like the now me too, though.
This just shows that she is self-aware of what she was and what the ideal in her mind was, and that they were separate from each other at the moment. In a way, this parallels what March thinks she is now and what she was before she was encased in the ice. It also shows 3 things: the acceptance of who she was, the willingness to change when prompted, and the ability to look towards the future despite not knowing anything about her past. This is what March 7th wants to show you, and herself. It's so easy to gauge and see how March 7th is like. She can be read like an open book, whether that be through constantly teasing her and she retorting back with us having copycat-titis, or when she shows her anxiousness as the astral train prepares to leap into a new planet. You can instantly tell what March 7th is like, but there's more to it than meets the eye. There's plenty of hints not necessarily shown on March's face, and part of being so expressive is that it lulls you in a false sense of trust. March 7th always seems to be happy, explicitly shows when she is sad, annoyed, or disgruntled. So naturally, if her default mood is a happy one, then she always must be, right? Let's explore 2 things that refute this. A simple one and a not so simple one. The simple one is her voice line when she gets downed in combat.
Freeze! I don't want to be alone.
It's pretty self-explanatory, no? I don't want to be alone. She's scared that she might be alone like the time she was trapped in ice for God knows how long. But that is merely surface deep. We can go even deeper than that. To do that, let's visit the not so simple one and explore March 7th's iceberg, her bedroom. In March 7th's bedroom, you have around 5 things you can interact with. But there are 3 that are particularly peculiar and interconnected. When you first step into her room, you see a mirror to your left. Strangely, it has no reflection. Move forward a bit and you see all these pictures of your adventures. And the Trailblazer comments how creepy it is and questions how these angles were even possible to be taken. Lastly, a little to the right is a teddy bear inside a bunny cubicle. And Trailblazer comments that it's a perfect metaphor for March. That is where it all hits. Happiness was merely a facade, and behind that veiled curtain was the insecurity of uncertainty. March 7th had a mirror that showed no reflection, possibly showing only hers. It's a mirror that could have been made from the remnants of 6-phased ice, and thus only shows the person imprisoned in it. So every time she looks at that mirror, she doesn't need to question whether she exists or not, because this mirror was made solely for her, and in that world, she was the only one that existed. The pictures on her wall were her trademark vlog memories. They were filled with pictures of not only herself, but everything and everyone in her adventures. It's interesting because this wall again affirms her existence, but what's in direct contrast to her mirror is the presence of others in those pictures. It's in opposition to the idea that she alone exists in this world. These pictures show the idea that the world continues to revolve on even without her. She exists and doesn't exist at the same time. But then you see the teddy bear inside the bunny, and it makes sense. She feels displacement, waking up in a time and totally unknown place to her. She herself not even knowing why she was put inside that block of ice, or better yet, if she even existed before the block of ice in the first place. At the same time, the present continues to live on for her with all these pent-up emotions, and she cherishes those moments. She cherishes the Astral Express Crew. But was she able to cherish herself if the day she could learn her truth never came? This is best exemplified by her character's story, Part 4. March 7th looks at herself in the mirror, imagining dozens of potential past lives for herself as she tries on the various outfits that Himiko had assembled for her. But she can't be sure what her past was like, and what kind of past a girl like her should have. The only thing March 7th can choose to be is her current self, and the only thing she can look forward to is the future. She is both frightened and glad. You can even see through these emotions in her eidolons. The first 3 pertain to memories, the next 2 pertain to past lessons and never forgetting them. The last is wanting to remain in a stillness that could mean it could make her stagnant and shackled to an unknown past, but at the same time it could mean that it's happiness in the moment she wished to cherish. This is the inner conflict March 7th doesn't want to show you. But now we know March's internal struggles. For someone so outwardly happy to be filled with emotional discord, one's just gotta ask, where the hell did March 7th come from? And why was she encased in that ice?
The universe. The Astral Express. Eons. Did I get dragged into a science fiction movie or something? This Stellaron thing in my
Are you
body?
talking about the stars? I've done stuff like that before. But it wasn't stars for me, though. It was lights.
You are probably wondering why I played this particular clip, but this is probably our most valuable clue into March's origins. She talks about catching lights, similar to the Trailblazers' stretch out arms for the stars. And I just had to put 2 and 2 together. You know what's a form of light? Oneiric Shards. Let's take a look at an Oneiric Shards description. They are crystallized lights floating in the sea, pulsing with the residual dream of an ancient Leviathan. Everything of the old world turned in the end into candlelight that illuminates the darkness ahead. A lot of things to unpack here. First, let's start with the obvious resemblance of the color palette of an Oneiric Shard to March, as if it was a fragment of the ice in which she was once imprisoned in. Second, Oneiric Shards pulse in a Leviathan's dream. In the Trailblazer's dream, then we see something resembling a Leviathan, and with the way March talked about catching lights, it would be safe to assume that she failed to catch it, as if they were merely floating in her dreams. And those same shards were from the old world, and it illuminated the darkness within the future like a lighthouse. Or perhaps those were shards formed by a wall built by Klepoth, the Aeon of Preservation, to protect the living worlds. Before I proceed any further, it is important to enlighten us on a little bit of Honkai Star Rail's history in order to further understand the gravity of what I just said. You can find this in one of Welt's dialogues while aboard the Astral Express. He tells us that there is a gap in history between the birth of the worlds and the birth of the Aeons we know today. And the little that we do know about that time was that Leviathans existed, basically. They were ancient beings that we knew nothing about because the Aeons of Enigmata were wiping historical records pre-Aeon era. The only thing made clear in Welt's dialogue was that there was this Leviathan Aeon hybrid, Ouroboros, the veracity that was seen in legends as a last Leviathan before the worlds gave birth to the first and oldest Aeon, Klepoth, the Preservation. So, with a little bit of background information, we can now start from the very beginning. Ouroboros the Veracity was the drinker of worlds, the unsatisfied devourer, the black hole with thought. It's safe to say that this Aeon Leviathan hybrid was a threat to the living worlds. Remember, he was the last recorded Leviathan to have lived before the Aeons appeared. So, around the time he disappeared must be when the very first Aeon, Klepoth the Preservation, was born. You see, Aeons have something called the primum module to live by. The easiest way to explain what this is to give you an example. Let's say the Aeon of Harmony could never construct discord between worlds. She can't do it because it's against her nature, her primum module. The very first Aeon was of preservation. Thus, its primum module was protection, the preservation of all living worlds. And Klepoth sensed an imminent threat, a threat of veracity, that if left unchecked, then it would end all of the living worlds. And so, he constructed a powerful, light-years-long seal to protect the worlds, and thus, Ouroboros the Veracity, the last known living Leviathan, was sealed. Oneiric Shards came to be as a result of this light-years-long seal weakening. Remember, Oneiric Shards are crystallized lights floating in the sea of stars, pulsing with residual dreams of an ancient Leviathan. And that same ancient Leviathan was what Klepoth froze. Klepoth froze Ouroboros into that seal to protect all the living worlds. And after millions and millions of light years passed, the strength of the preservation seal would inevitably start to wane. It cracked, it chipped, and then inevitably fragmented into floating blocks of ice scattered into the darkness of space. Some of these blocks would fragment further into floating little dreams, the Oneiric Shards. The question is, though, would the bigger chunks of ice turn out to be other March 7th's laying dormant waiting for their own Astral Express crew? Or were they split off parts from Ouroboros and once unfrozen could regenerate back up to the once mighty Leviathan? Well, you can look at it as many fragments that all could be a version of a March 7th somewhere, or parts of Ouroboros' husk, or a hybrid of both, but there's one thing I haven't mentioned that could erase concerns and doubts, putting a pretty bow on March's origin gift box. And that is 6 phased ice. From this point on, I will assume the laws of our sciences correlate somewhat with Honkai Star Rail's sciences. So there are total 18 phases of ice known to man, starting from Ice 1, increasing the pressure and compressing Ice 1 in turn produces Ice 2, then compressing it further produces Ice 3, and so on. In most cases, the conversion of phases requires higher pressure and differing temperature. There is one phase in particular that is of most interest, and it's the phase of ice that Kleepoth most probably used in his light-years-long seal. Ice 7. Ice 7 is a special phase of ice in a sense that it remains stable even as pressure increases dramatically. It doesn't even need to be at freezing temperature as long as the pressure is high enough. And the only place you find that sort of pressure in our planet is the Earth's mantle, in which it wouldn't be able to form Ice 7 anyway because the temperature is too high. So there's still this delicate balance in order to create Ice 7. But I haven't talked about what Ice 7 does, nor its special property. It is theoretically capable of expanding and growing really fast. It could very well create shockwaves that would compress anything with water, freezing it immediately because of the high pressure. It has the potential to freeze all life, thus ending a world. Or perhaps freezing, one of which that could end a world. We can connect this to something Welt said about March 7th's 6-phased ice. It is a substance that adheres to the imaginary law, meaning it was birthed from the origin of the universes itself, the imaginary tree, and no external forces can change its form. Welt goes on to say that whoever did this did so to either protect her or banish her. Kleepoth was birthed from that same imaginary tree. His prima module was to protect the universes, and Kleepoth made Ice 7, or 7-phased ice, to imprison Ouroboros. Once the seal weakened, it started to fragment into smaller and smaller chunks. As the seal's influence became weaker and weaker, its ability to maintain that prison became less stable. The only difference here is that it's Kleepoth's influence that maintained the phase of ice, and it was waning. And thus, as the light-years-long seal fractured further, a little bit more of that influence sheds along with it. The chances of this phase 7 ice changing increase. Eventually, the seal gave way to multiple fragments of Ouroboros' scattering across the universe. Since no external forces could change their form, they remained as 7-phased ice shards. But each shard, down to the tiniest, had potential to change its form, if met with imagination. And out of the possible fragments that Kleepoth's seal broke into, with each possibly having the potential of someone encased within, one chunk of ice met just the right circumstance, just the right people. What stumbled upon them, the Astral Express Crew, was a cold prison of 6-phased ice that melted with a warm smile from within. That day, on March 7th. Hello, I apologize for breaking the moment there, but I didn't want the music to play that long. Demonetization. This was a different video. It was a lore video, and in many senses, this was what an ideal lore video, that I would watch, looks like. So if you made it this far, I thank you very much. I know this is a stark departure from the videos I usually do. I mean, all my videos are like that the last few months, but this one I actually really enjoy doing, and these kinds of videos might be what I stick to going forward. That's why if you've watched it till the end, again, I thank you. And I hate to break the moment here that I've created here, but I need to play my outro. Slime King, Twitch, Discord, Celebratory Jackie.